Welcome to the Consciousness Anywhere and Everywhere podcast. I am Shannonohara, and I invite you to a completely new world of possibilities. Hello, hello, and welcome to this month's Talk to the Entities specialty focus, relationship, and entities. This is a limited featured series on the Consciousness Anywhere podcast for the year of 2025. If you are entity interested, entity consciousness curious, you want to check out all of the preceding Talk to the Entities specialty podcasts that have come this year. Obviously, this month is relationship and entity focused, and there will be a few more left this year. So why relationship and entities? Well, twofold. Entities, the presence of spirits, ancestors, deceased spouses, just to name a few, can and do have an impact on our other relationships. I don't want to call them living relationships because entities kind of like live, but they live different than us. They live different than in bodies. People can actually have and do have primary relationships with spirits rather than people. So that's one aspect of relationship and entities. And the other is that the relationships that we have are entities themselves. What do I mean by that? Would the relationship exist if you didn't have the other person? You know, if you weren't, I'll just use marriage as an example, but obviously relationships is broad and varied. But if you weren't married, would that relationship exist? No. So that relationship is an entity that the both of you create together. That entity doesn't exist with just you. That entity doesn't exist with just the other person. That entity exists between you, and it's something that you guys create between you that is either a constant creation or is a stagnation, that the point being that we can create entities. And in this context and in this conversation, I am asserting that we create the entity of relationship, meaning the entity of relationship can continue to be created and evolve, which is a slightly more complex or a little bit deviating from what I believe is like the basic entry of the relationship and entity conversation, which is the influence of entities on our relationships and the relationships we have with literal entities. So that's what I mean by entities in relationship. Obviously, this is a really big thing to bite off because relationship in and of itself, in my opinion, and in my experience as a facilitator of consciousness for the last 20 plus years, is that relationship is actually the craziest place for people. It's the place where we have the most fantasies. It's also the place where we limit ourselves the most. So yes, can relationships be rewarding and beautiful and expansive and contributive? Absolutely. But if you think right now about the relationships you have had throughout your lifetime, has the majority been ease, joy, glory, and happiness, or has the majority been, the opposite? So in a relationship in and of itself is a big conversation. And then looking at the entity and relationship piece of that is very, very niche. So what I'm indicating with that is that entities can impact our relationships, and we can have relationships with entities. And that's not going to be the macro scope of what is occurring in the relationship. But if we don't acknowledge that entities can have an impact on our relationships and that we can have relationships with entities, there is nothing but acknowledging that can actually deal with what occurs when we have unconscious relationships with entities and or we have entities around that we're not acknowledging that are impacting our relationships. So that's my introduction to relationships and entities. Obviously, this is a 3-part in-depth specialty class that I facilitated originally some years ago that exists in the Talk to the Entities shop. This is all of the topics that I've been going over on the Consciousness Anywhere podcast for Talk to the Entities are all available in much more scope and depth in the Talk to the Entities shop. For those of you guys that know that you need to get more of this information and deal with it more. So let's talk about the first one of how entities can impact our relationships. So I think the easiest way to see this is through the ancestral lens. Obviously, all of my Asian friends listening to this, and my African friends listening to this, and my Latin American friends listening to this, and all the other native peoples listening to this know about ancestors. It's only the white people who don't get it about ancestors, but let's just leave that aside for now. So ancestors are obviously the denotation of somebody who preceded your genetic body and is part of your genetic line. I ultimately don't believe in family as we understand it in this reality, because when your body dies, you're essentially not really part of that family anymore. I mean, you're literally not part of that family anymore because you no longer have a genetic expression. You're an infinite being, which has infinite choice. And you're also an infinite being with infinite choice with your genetic expression. So family, as we understand it, is I believe, very limited way of looking at our existence. And we have to recognize that if an entity expresses itself or thinks it is, or is presenting as what we call ancestor, and if you're just listening to this, I'm using air quotes with my fingers, ancestor. And if you're watching this, ancestor, air quotes, because when your body dies, or crosses over. Actually, dies is the wrong word. Your body never dies. Energy never ends. The energy that animates your body now will return forward to the ecosystem from which it came. When you transition, when you cross over, are you still going to be your gender? Are you still going to be the name that you call yourself now? Will you be your nationality? Will you still be part of the family that you're genetically bound to now in your body? No. Absolutely no, you will not be. What we identify ourselves with in our embodiment, our name, our gender, our nationality, and then all the personality traits, et cetera, that go into defining us embodied are irrelevant without a body. So you have to look at, without a body, do you exist? Obviously, yes. From my perspective and in this conversation, yes. Entities, your consciousness is with or without a body. So when your body dies, when you transition and your body goes back forward into the ecosystem, then what? Well, choice, obviously, infinite choice. And this is where the rubber meets the road with a lot of the entity work that I do, is that a lot of entities, a lot of beings, instead of choosing to become oneness again, or return to source, or become infinite energy, sort of saying the same thing in 3 different ways there, they hang around in the definition of their previous lifetime. Meaning, imagine that you are, without a body, going to identify yourself as the name, the gender, the nationality, and the family grouping that you currently have now for thousands and thousands of years or longer. Is that of interest to you? Obviously, if family is the only choice you're willing to have and the biggest scope of your possibility, then yes. But if you include other choices, being an infinite being, not having the same definition. And I know that this might be challenging or confronting to people's identity, but that's what this conversation needs to be. It's this softening of the definition we apply to ourselves that isn't natural and isn't real and is flexible. It's like you change throughout your lifetime or you can change throughout your lifetime, and you can change after your lifetime too. And what makes you want to hold on to the identity of your gender, your nationality, your body, your name in your family now? Is it that you just are honoring the limitation and the story of the family? Is it that that's like the sum total of the creativity you're willing to exert? Because once you come to a definition, you stop creating. You no longer need to seek, to change, to question, to evolve. And some people think that's easier. I do not. I wonder what else is possible. So what I've seen with this entity and relationship thing is I've seen it directly with a lot of people that I have worked with. I have a colleague and a friend and someone who I've known for years who's been a client, and he's also a Talk to the Entities facilitator now. He is of Chinese descent. He's Malaysian Chinese, and he is generally a very happy person and went through this stage of just being really low and really depressed and just like couldn't really figure out the direction of his life. He came to me and we had a conversation, and what was actually occurring was that his maternal grandmother, so his mother's mother, was very present with him and wanted him to get married, as a good Chinese boy should, right? You should get married so that you can create more bodies for your ancestors to reincarnate into, so you guys stay in the same genetic line ad infinitum. Where is the choice in that for anybody? So his grandmother was there, and he hadn't realized it, but as soon as he recognized that his grandmother was there, they got to have a conversation, and he expressed that no, he wasn't going to get married and have children. And it sort of was like something that they needed to talk about between them. And she gave up on her point of view and she moved on. And his energy was freed up and he sort of had himself back again. But the reason why he got depressed was not due to really that his grandmother was bad or wrong, just that he wasn't acknowledging her presence and her influence. And this is the whole entity and relationship thing, where that entity, which in that case was his maternal grandmother, was impacting his relationship with himself due to her point of view about the kind of relationship that he should be having as a Chinese man. So that's one, I think, very understandable circumstance. But this can also show up as, having a spouse that transitions out of their body and doesn't leave. And this is quite common, actually. If you have two people who are very attached to each other, or if you don't want to let go of the deceased spouse, or the deceased spouse has a commitment to take care of you, or you guys just want to stay together, then that can occur. And somebody in a body can still be in a primary relationship with somebody who's stepped out of their body. And I believe in an entity positive and entity inclusive society that kind of relationship would be socially acceptable and appropriate. I personally don't see that there's anything wrong with a relationship like that, because I'm not entity prejudiced. The only problem that can occur in that circumstance is when you want to have a relationship with somebody else or have another spouse, but you're still like essentially married to your deceased spouse. And it can create a lot of conflicts and difficulty with getting close to anybody else. So there's that one. I think in New Age religion, they call it eternal flame or twin flame, but that actually literally could be an entity that you've been with for a really long time. And that's not bad, but like you have to look at the circumstance of today, and is that working? And do both of you have choice? Or is that sort of that relationship existing from a decision that both of you guys made like a long time ago? And is that still relevant? So this is where being present with how entities work. And this is the same for all of you guys listening. If you're particularly committed to a specific person, or you feel like you need to take care of somebody, or that particular person doesn't want to let you go if they're very attached to you, That can create a lot of choicelessness when you yourself transition and cross over. And I see this a lot with entities where they're stuck is sort of a dramatic word, but they're not moving. They're not changing. They're not making another choice after they step out of their bodies due to either somebody that they care about on who is still embodied holding on to them and not wanting them to go, or the being, the entity itself feeling that it wants to look after or take care of somebody who still has a body, and or there's the big family obligation commitment intertwining where you as a being were never given the freedom to have a choice. So you're obligated to come back into the same genetic line and ancestral line over and over and over, which is why you can have a lot of ancestors hanging around telling you to get pregnant, inducing the interest in getting a partner and reproducing so those ancestors can have a body in the same genetic line. And none of this is wrong, but this is a conversation I believe is really helpful for people who want to have a choice and actually create their lives, not just be a material, genetic contributor to somebody else's wishes. Hello, this is Shannon in another outfit and another time and place. If you're enjoying these relationship-focused podcasts, I invite you to check out all of the sex and relationship content, previously conducted classes, and access consciousness classes that I have available for all of you on my website. It will be linked below. If you're ready to really begin to unwind, unlock, and transform the places where you've been stuck in creating the kind of relationships that make your life easier, if you haven't enjoyed sex, if you go crazy in any of these areas, please recognize you're not alone. These areas can be extremely rewarding, and they can also be extremely difficult. The more of you have, the easier these areas become. Who did you learn about relationship from? Did you receive an education about the kind of sex and copulation that would heal your body, create more joy for you and the other, and create more space, peace, and possibility? What kind of sexual education were you ever given? It's like, where do you go to access what's light and not constantly be in reaction to the projections, the expectations, the heavy, and the difficulty, the secrets, the control that can exist so dynamically in the area of sex and relationship? Check out these classes if you would like to change your life. So that's entities in relationship. Obviously, this is, any of my Indian friends, Asian, I know this is a very relevant topic for you guys. Again, European descent, this conversation is probably less close to you. However, just because it's less close to you doesn't mean that it's not happening to you. So if you have an entity that you're committed to from another lifetime, or if you're still very intertwined with ancestral commitments, that can have a lot of impacts on your relationship today and your relationships today and your own free will, which I'm a big proponent and advocate of free will, which I want to have a choice. So that's my whole love affair with consciousness is consciousness creates more choice. And I love having a choice. I want to be creating my life, not at the effect of external circumstances that are dictating and determining how I feel, what I get to choose, who I have sex with and who I don't have sex with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this whole conversation about entities and relationship through the lens of Talk to the Entities is to create more choice, more awareness, not more significance and more hysteria, which has really been so prevailing with entity conversations. Yeah. So that's that. Now, if you know that if this is relevant for you, if you've got ancestral entities that are present or just an old lover that's present, there's ways to deal with that. But this is where this is like the intersection between entity work and like relationship counseling, which I believe is actually much harder. Just dealing with entities, in my opinion, in my experience, is infinitely easier than dealing with relationships. Relationships are so much more complicated and people are so much more bogged down and twisted into things in relationships. I feel like I'm being really negative about relationships, but in my experience, working with relationship is a lot trickier than working with entities. So then when you combine them, when you combine entities and relationship, it can become a much more skilled conversation. Well, I'm really noticing the focus is out on this camera. Sorry, guys, if you're watching this, you're going to have to see my face in soft focus because this camera is like, there we go. Maybe it's focusing back here. Like really not focusing on me. Oh, it's focusing on this book. This is the Talk to the Entities book. Okay, maybe this is what. Okay, so yeah, so let's move this book. So this is the Talk to the Entities book. This is the German copy. If this book is in, I think, 8 languages, including English or in addition to English. So check that out if you're interested. This is my first book. This is the first Talk to the Entities book. Obviously, go to Talk to the Entities. I think it's talktotheentities.com/book, or just Google Talk to the Entities book and you'll find it. And it's in Mandarin, Japanese, Spanish, Polish, German, Dutch. I think one other language I'm forgetting. So now that I've moved that, wow, that book was really trying to get everyone's attention because the camera kept focusing on that book in the background. I love that. Okay, now I've moved the book. Now the camera's focusing on me. Hello, entities. So if this is relevant to you, if you know you would like more choice around your ancestral relationships, your other entity relationships, that's when we get into the tools. And that does in a lot of, it's just a choice, really. So number one, easiest form is it's a choice. It's a choice for you to make. And if that choice doesn't seem like it's coming easily or there's a lot of confusion around it, that's when you need to talk to a facilitator, reach out to a Talk to the Entities facilitator, or get the relationship and entities class, because you'll be able to get all the tools and sort of different questions and conversations that you can use to address this for yourself in a very empowering and clear way, in my humble opinion. And or like what else is possible. And again, this whole conversation, the whole reason I'm creating these podcasts and having this conversation is like, who talks about this and who makes this easy? And the thing that I really try to do with Talk to the Entities is make it easy, because we don't need to be controlled by this stuff. But so many of us are controlled by what we're not willing to be aware of and what we're not willing to deal with. So there you go. There's your little mini lecture on relationship and entities. I hope this helps. And what else is possible? Be beautiful people out there seeking something different, seeking more consciousness. You are not wrong. And what if there was a level of ease and peace and happiness that you could have and that you could also gift to your ancestors, to all the entities that could have another choice? And what kind of world would that create? Bye, guys. Thank you for listening to this show. My target is to make consciousness easy to find and choose. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes and share this with somebody who you know who might be looking for more consciousness in their life. You can visit me on Shannon-Ohara.com or talktotheentities.com. And to learn more about the amazing tools of Access Consciousness, you can visit accessconsciousness.com and be sure to subscribe to the podcast.